So you guys are going in there. They call you essential workers. Were you getting like major hazard pay, safe conditions, all that?
There was hazard pay for a while, and in the beginning, it really appeared that Starbucks was making really strong progressive efforts to help us kind of navigate this while everyone was really confused. And then I think once it started like in the return back towards the transition to the summer season, um, it kind of just transitioned more back into okay, like it's business as usual, even though it
And we
isn't.
and we lost the hazard pay, and we weren't receiving any kind of like compensations for any of that. They even
Right.
started bringing back in like an expectation to meet certain times at the
Right.
window, or like business needs. Even though we were understaffed or we were losing people didn't want to come back because they were uncomfortable, like risking their health.
hmm So can you kind of talk about moving forward to now? So union efforts start in the beginning. It seems like, it's like a domino effect. One store, most of the workers are for the union. Then you obviously have to convince other stores. Then Starbucks tried to make it where every store in Buffalo would have to be for this. And then all of a sudden they start flooding Buffalo with like Howard Schultz, the chairman, and like the president of North America who's mopping floors and all this crazy crap. Can you kind of talk about when did what happened in your store in specific in terms of them flooding senior managers, out of state people coming, and then them hiring new workers in your store?
We were lucky that there was like three of our shift supervisors who were at the initial organizing meeting with the union, so we were really quickly able to kind of get a lot of people at our store on board, in the sense of relaying information like quickly, efficiently in a positive environment where we didn't have like a ton of managers watching over us and stuff like that. But it was like 2 days, no, one day after our campaign went public, that we had our district manager already sitting in our store just having calls, and like he had never done that. I've never seen him just like stop by when my manager wasn't there
Hmm.
to just sit in and like have take calls and like just be there if we need him.
I know partners that have been here for 10 years that have never had these listening sessions, which are apparently really common. And we should have, in theory, already met Roxanne and Deanna and Allison and everyone by now. We just slipped under the rug. And that's kind of been like the whole argument this time from their side. But it's very clear that none of this started happening until anything about the union was public.
So moving forward, they're putting all these new people in, new workers. Did they give a reason why they had to add all these new workers into the stores? And what was adding all these new workers into the store? Was it making things smoother, or was it kind of adding a monkey wrench into the existing workers like communication about the union, that kind of camaraderie about the union? How did these new workers being basically parachuted in affect things?
So honestly, I haven't had much experience with new workers yet. When they started overstaffing our store, when I asked like why we were having 16 people on at a time, I was met with the concern that we as a store have a lot of callouts, and to have like two callouts a day was a pretty average thing, even preceding our union efforts. So that wasn't like something that was new. And I was happy to see somebody addressing something, but there was no real solution to the problem. What happened was that they closed stores down for renovations and for training sites. So they just had a lot of people at their disposal and had needed somewhere to put them. I'm sure they would much rather have us in a position of production than paying or than not working at all.
Mm.
So these stores are closed. They don't want to like give them. They're like, you can use vacation pay, but you could also work here. Obviously, they would like love for people to work here. Not everybody wants to use their vacation pay, and you end up having like 16 to 20 people from three different stores all together at one time. As soon as these stores, like the Niagara Falls Boulevard location, had opened back up, and we lost probably like 10 extra people that we were having a day back to that home store. So then what happened in like retrospect here was they completely changed the hours of operation. Partners from our home store now have to transfer out because we are not open for hours that they can work.
Right.
They didn't ever really address that issue. Now we have I think four newer people that came in, and I think that there is somebody who's been working. We've obviously been out since the 11th and 12th. We haven't seen a ton of people, but there was not a whole lot of looking for a solution in the time previous. When they were staffing with 16 to 20 people, that was so that they were housing partners who didn't have anywhere to go.
And why were they closing these other locations? Did it have something to do with those locations being pro-union?
So,
Yes.
yeah, one of the concerns was staffing and training that was raised, and that, we don't have enough time to have enough adequate training before partners are shoved on the floor and expected to be a part of the team. And so they closed down a store and turned it into a training facility. But, the people that are coming out of there being trained are still not getting any sort of quality training. And in my opinion, I almost think it's worse, because at least when you train at your home store, you kind of know where everything is and you get to run through it, and you're also paired with someone who works there who you can easily go to for help. It feels very confusing, that maybe there's people from corporate who are doing the training rather than local barista trainers. I'm not really sure how it's working, but it doesn't seem to be truly effective to what our problems are.
So I came in one day and it was me and literally 4 or 5 other people at open. So that's an unheard of situation. I never experienced that many people, but one of the girls was already kind of feeling under the wet. Well, she was out the whole week previous and she was coming off of a cold. So my manager for some reason was also in at open that day, but he sees her. He's like, "Can I go talk to her actually?" And he sends her home, and I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" She already had 2 negative COVID tests present, so I was really confused why she was getting sent home on an isolation pay, on an isolation period, and is gonna get isolation pay for COVID procedural things when she just came back with 2 negative tests. So
Was she for the union?
Every partner was perceived to be for the union at our store. We had a really unanimous kind of majority where everybody was wearing a pin in support, and they really couldn't discern who was and wasn't at that point.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
So she got sent home, and I asked "Hey, how come she got sent home?" And whatever. And we're having a little bit of a conversation. And he's like, "I cough a couple of times." And he's like, "You have symptoms right now. You're sniffling and you're coughing. You have things that are going to put you out for 10 days. And I was like, "What?" But I'm I'm not actually sick, but I can't just use sick time because I have a little bit of a cough. And it's October in Buffalo. Everybody's having a little bit of a seasonal thing. And, I came out wrong in that aspect because I ended up having COVID, but I get sent home that day. He's saying that, whatever, we need to be safe. We get sent home. But Carol, the next day,
I went in and pre-existing to this, I have a mild fainting disorder. So I just need to be on top of making sure that I'm eating throughout the day. And this particular day, I just had a bunch of caffeine, but I hadn't eaten yet. So I was on my break. I grabbed a pastry because I had felt a little lightheaded. And I told my manager, "Hey, I'm going to mark this out in a second. I just want to get something in my stomach so that I feel a little bit better. And then I'll come make sure that it's marked out just so I'm not stealing." And I go in the back, and he comes back and he asked me, he's like, "Are you feeling dizzy?" And I was like, "Yeah, a little bit, but I just have a fainting disorder. So, it's something that I know how to deal with, and I'm taking care of it. I'll be fine by the end of my break." And he was like, "Okay, well, if you're dizzy, you need to go home." And I was like, are you sure that you want me to leave?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then he pulled me aside before I left, and he was like, "Actually, let's put your symptoms in." And dizziness and a little bit of a runny nose because I had sniffled were my symptoms. And then he sent me on a 10-day isolation. So this was Tuesday that I was sent home. And
Of last week.
Yeah, I did not have my first, not of last week, of the week before. So on the 12th.
Mm-hmm.
On the 15th, I had my first symptom, and I had been isolating since the 12th. So previous to those days, I did not have any. And the first night, I just felt a little bit run down.
Mm-hmm.
I got tested on Monday, and then on Tuesday night, it came back that I had COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So then we were both out, but luckily we didn't expose anyone at work because we were sent home before, but the timeline, lines up that within those 12 days from like October 1st to the 12th is probably when we would have gotten COVID, right before we went out on that isolation. And
the only thing that's really been different in my life is that I've been working with upwards of 10 to 15 or 10 extra people, 12, 13 extra people.
And that's just people on the floor. Like if we have 16 partners that are working on the floor, we also have like 4 to 5 managers that are hovering around in the lobby, in the back of house, talking to each other, asking to be introduced to people. So there's just like a million things. And then there's customers as well. So it's like there's no room in the store.
And then it's really confusing how they were like super concerned about a little bit of like about Carol feeling a little bit dizzy and me not even outwardly expressing feeling unwell as a COVID concern, but not a COVID concern that we had 3 people or 3 stores working together in one.
The amount of people packed into that building tripled in that week. It's like it would be hard to kind of attribute this to anything else solely because that change was so drastic.
And not even to mention the people who are coming in from all over the country. This is not like local or anything. Like if there's outbreak from travel or anything like that, like anything could be possible. But that's the one thing that's changed is my work environment.
And is everybody, people technically, I think Starbucks, you have to wear masks if you work there, but obviously not everybody has their mask up all the way all the time and things like that.
If you're a customer, you don't really have to abide by any particular mask rules. So all of the workers are required to wear their masks, but now we also are worrying about, okay, well, if we have to wear our masks, like what about customers? Because that was a thing for a while, but now we're being exposed as well from that end. And then all of the extra people, it's just
right.
Feels like a lot.
So obviously, we can't trace your whole day, but you guys were telling me other than work, you weren't in big crowds, you weren't around a lot of people, you've been careful during the pandemic. So reason would think your biggest risk or the most likely scenario is you got it at work with all these extra people, most of them unnecessary, packed like sardines. So they send you home. Your roommates, I assume?
Yes.
Yeah. So talk to me about how the symptoms were. And it seems like you guys went through whatever the New York State protocols are, yet even when you passed those protocols, they still kept you away.
So I let my 2 managers know Tuesday night at 11 p.m. that I tested positive. And no one reached out to me by the time of like Sunday, like this past Sunday. And my isolation from New York State was up Monday because I started having symptoms on earlier in the week. I had called the store because I was like, hi, no one's really checked in with me. And I just want to like let you guys know that like my isolation period is up. Like I know I still live with my roommate and her isolation period is extended a little bit longer, but like I haven't heard anything from you guys, so I'm trying to like be somewhat proactive. And they were like, well, you're not allowed to come in. You can't come in. You have to be completely symptom free in order to come in. And it was just weird because there are different guidelines from like New York State with being vaccinated and exposed. And it's still a little bit unclear if there's like a common rule, but Starbucks told me I'm not allowed to come back until I was completely symptom free. And then I inquired about, okay, well, if you're not going to let me come back, will I be paid for this extended leave? And I asked that on Monday and it was this morning. So I reached out to Deanna, who is the regional vice president. I called her twice. She didn't answer. I called our district manager twice. She answered and called me back once, and she didn't get me an answer until this morning. And I spoke with my store manager like 3 or 4 times about it, and she never actually got back to me. But the person that came through with the answer first wasn't even a person that I had contacted about this. It was someone that Danka was talking to about scheduling. He reached out to her, and I was like still fighting to like figure out whether I was getting paid or not, but like he had an immediate answer. But it was weird that it took like 3.5, 4 days to figure out if I'm gonna get paid, even though like
through like
the
3 level
reason-
ranks of Starbucks. Like
even though like the reason is that you guys won't let me come back.